The night had teeth again. Wind came down from the wall in long blue knives, slipping through every gap in Winterfell's stone and biting any skin foolish enough to be bare. Jon Snow stood alone in the yard beneath the shadow of the broken tower, breath ghosting in front of him, long sword held point down so the tip just barely touched the packed, frozen dirt. The castle slept. The torches along the battlements burned low, muttering to themselves in orange tongues that swayed with every gust. He stayed anyway. He had told Robb he was going to the barracks to mend a strap. He had told Arya he was tired. He had told himself that if he went to bed, the thoughts that gnawed him raw might soften. They did not. They never did. So he came here instead, to the quiet yard, to the sound of the wind and the creak of old wood and the distant, soft roar of the hot springs beneath the castle. Here he could imagine he was only a sword and a body, and that was easier than being Jon Snow. Bastard. Not a Stark. Not really. He lifted the blade again, muscles complaining, and moved through the strikes Donal Noye had taught him when he was little more than a boy with 2 long arms and a stubborn jaw. Cut, turn, parry, step. He did not think about the king coming north, or about the way Lord Eddard's face had tightened when the Raven arrived. He did not think about Catelyn Stark's flat, cold eyes when they chanced to meet his. Steel hissed through the freezing air. His boots slid, found purchase. His breath quickened, then steadied with the rhythm of the forms. In his mind he was no bastard, only a knight of the Kingsguard fighting in some great hall of marble and light, the eyes of the realm upon him. On the downswing of a heavy cut, his sword caught the torchlight, and for a heartbeat the steel flashed red gold. It was nothing, a trick of the fire of his tired eyes. Yet he stopped, the sword held half-raised, heart thudding in his chest with a sudden and inexplicable sense that he was being watched. "Who's there?" he called softly. The only answer was the wind worrying the banners and the dull crackle of the torches. A raven croaked somewhere above, unseen. Jon swallowed and let the sword fall to rest on his shoulder. He was not a child to be spooked by shadows and night sounds. Ghost would have warned him if anyone else were near. The dire wolf lay stretched at the yard's edge by the door to the hall, white fur a pale smudge in the gloom, red eyes half-lidded, but Jon knew his ears were keen, his nose open to every scent. Yet the feeling of being observed did not fade. It shifted. It felt less like eyes on his back and more like a presence, as if the very air around him had leaned closer. Jon turned slowly toward the nearest torch, drawn despite himself. The flame was ordinary at first glance. Orange base, yellow tongues, smoke curling black. But as he stared, its heart seemed to deepen in color, a vivid molten red, hot as a forge. It guttered, flared, and within its small, shifting body the suggestion of a shape emerged. Not clear, not solid, more a hint carved in light. A curve like a shoulder, the sweep of hair, the line of a cheek. He blinked hard. The shape was still there. The flame whispered, not with sound, but with intent, a murmur that seemed to brush along the inside of his thoughts the way a hand might brush hair from a brow. Jon took an involuntary step back, sword rising, the breath catching sharp in his chest. "Who are you?" His voice came out hoarse. The flame wavered, thinned, then surged. For a heartbeat it elongated, becoming a slender figure in radiant red and gold, a man made of burning glass. He saw the flash of a sword hilt at his hip. He saw the suggestion of a harp against his back. Eyes like dark wine glanced toward him from within the fire, distant and sorrowful and far too knowing. Then the wind gusted through the yard, and the torch simply went out. Darkness crashed in. "Ghost!" Jon's shout was louder than he intended. The dire wolf was on his feet instantly, hackles bristling, teeth bared. He came to Jon's side in a blur of pale muscle, red eyes scanning the yard, nostrils flaring. A growl rumbled low in his chest. "There was something," Jon whispered, feeling foolish even as he said it. "In the torch." Ghost flicked an ear but gave no sign of scenting anything unexpected. The yard was the same as it had always been, only now a little darker for the missing light. Jon's skin prickled beneath his jerkin. The sword felt heavier, the night thicker. He sheathed the blade with less grace than he liked and crossed the yard quickly, Ghost pacing beside him, glancing back once at the dead torch before they slipped through the door and into the relative warmth of the tower. He did not look at the flames again that night, but something had looked at him, and the memory of those sorrowful eyes followed him into uneasy dreams. The king arrived 5 days later. Winterfell filled with colors and strangers, with laughter too loud for northern stone and scents that did not belong. Perfumes and southern leather and roasted meats basted in oils more costly than any farmer's yearly yield. Jon drifted at the edges of it all, present but not included, as he always was when the Stark blood of the family gathered in the great hall and he stood a pace back, a little apart. He knew his place. He had known it all his life. Yet that did not blunt the sharp, familiar sting when they lined up to greet the royal party and Catelyn Stark took up her position to Lady Stark's right, Sansa gleaming beside her, Robb straight at her shoulder, and Jon found himself half behind them, not quite within the line and not quite outside it. Robert Baratheon rode into the yard like a storm come south, heavy in his armor, black beard shot with gray, crowned helm askew. His face was flushed already, though the air still bit. When his gaze swept the line of Starks, Jon ducked his eyes without thinking. He had been warned of what this man was to his father, what he had meant to the rebellion that toppled the Dragon Kings. He had not been warned of the sheer weight of the king's presence, of the sense that the man carried his own weather with him. "Old friend," Robert boomed, striding forward to crush Eddard Stark in an embrace that seemed to shake the yard. "Too long, damn you. Far too long." There was talk, laughter, familiar words exchanged between men who had once been young together and were now heavy with years and burdens. Jon only half heard any of it. The cold crawled under his collar. He shifted his weight, aware of Ghost's absence. He had left the direwolf in his own chambers rather than risk the unease such a beast might cause the southern courtiers. He should not have looked up. He knew that even as his eyes rose. But he did. For a moment Robert's gaze slid past him, already moving toward the girls, the little ones. Then it snagged. Jon saw the king's eyes focus, the mirth in them dimming as they took in Jon's face. He knew what the king saw. Dark hair, gray eyes, the long Stark jaw. Bastard features, but Stark features nonetheless. Something like recognition flickered through Robert's expression. Not personal, Jon had never seen this man before today. Recognition of type, perhaps. A form. The king's gaze sharpened, his mouth tightening for a heartbeat. It was gone almost at once. Robert turned his smile toward Sansa, toward Arya, calling them sweetling and boy in turn. But Jon had seen that momentary narrowing of the eyes. He had seen the way the king's gaze had, just once, slid past him to Lord Eddard with an unreadable flicker. The sense of being watched came back, sharp as the first night in the yard. Only this time it did not come from the king. It came from the fires. Great braziers overlooked the yard, their coals stoked high in honor of royal arrival. As Jon stood there, a little behind the rest, the nearest brazier's flames leaned inward, toward him, as if a sudden draft had drawn them, though he felt no wind on his skin. The heart of the coals glowed a sizzling white red, and in them, only for a breath, less than that, the outline took shape again. A man's profile this time, exquisite and sorrowful, high-cheeked, hair like a fall of pale metal. A faint crown of faint flame rested on his brow, not the jagged antlers of the stag, but delicate, dragon-winged. Jon's throat closed. His hand twitched where it rested near his sword belt. The phantom turned his eyes from the royal party and looked at Jon. The contact was like stepping too close to a roaring hearth. Heat surged through Jon's chest, not painful but immense, filling him from within. For an instant the yard vanished. He smelled incense and hot stone, heard distant harp strings, and over it all the rumble of a river choked with bodies and mud. Then Luwin was nudging him gently, murmuring that he was dismissed, and the vision broke like a river ice under a boot. Jon went where he always went when the hall suffocated him, to the Godswood. He slipped away between greetings and feasts, between a king's booming voice and a queen's cool gaze, between Joffrey's arrogant laughter and Arya's scowls. No one stopped him. No one even noticed him go. The gods would embrace him like a wolf's cloak. Dark, quiet, smelling of wet earth and old sap. Snow lay in shallow drifts beneath the red branches. Water murmured softly around the black pool's edge. The heart tree watched all with its red-rimmed eyes and blood-carved face. Jon trudged through the drifted leaves until he stood beneath that ancient gaze. He did not kneel. He did not even quite know to whom one prayed here, gods or something older still. But his hands were shaking. The air was colder here than in the yard. His breath plumed white. No torches burned among the trees, no braziers, no hearth. Only the snow, the water, the white bark veins of the weirwood. "I'm going mad," he said aloud, just to hear the sound of his own voice. The trees gave no answer. Somewhere near the outer wall, a raven croaked again. Jon stared at the carved face. "You're watching, aren't you?" he muttered. "If there are gods, you're supposed to be watching. So what in all seven hells is happening to me?" He did not expect a reply. He this time received one. It did not come from the tree. Came from the pool. The surface of the black water, until that moment smooth as glass, rippled without any wind to disturb it. A soft hiss like steam rose from its center, and a faint glow began to seep up from beneath the surface, red as banked coals. Jon's stomach dropped. He took a step backward, boots slipping in the snow. The glow brightened, swelled, coiled like some slow, luminous serpent rising. Steam licked the air in delicate veils. The pool's surface bulged up in a rounded shape, then burst soundlessly into a pillar of red-gold light that did not burn the overhanging branches. In that pillar, fire formed a man. He was taller than Jon by a head at least, slender, with hair that hung to his shoulders in a shining cascade of silver-white flame. His features were fine, almost delicate, as if carved by a precise hand from the very idea of nobility. His eyes were dark, not burning like the rest of him, but deep, wine-red pools set in a face made of light. He wore no crown that Jon recognized, yet flame licked about his brow like the suggestion of one. A sword of pure fire hung at his hip, sheath and blade indistinguishable. For a long heartbeat, they simply stared at one another. A bastard of Winterfell and a man made of living flame. Jon's knees wanted to buckle. He held himself rigid by force of stubborn pride. "If you're a demon," he heard himself say, voice thin in his own ears. "I have steel." He fumbled for his sword. His fingers would not quite close around the hilt. The fireman's mouth curved, the faintest sad amusement. "I am no demon, Jon Snow," he said, and his voice was like harp strings over coals, like a song half remembered and half a dream. "There are worse monsters in this world than ghosts of old men and broken kings." Jon froze. The words were less chilling than the knowledge that this thing knew his name. "How do you?" "I have watched you for years," the man of fire said simply. "Through smoke and ember, through candle and hearth, through every flame you have ever stared into and wondered if something stared back. It did. I did." Jon's mouth had gone dry. Every muscle screamed at him to run, and he forced himself not to move. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Say it." The man's eyes did not leave his. They were sad. So sad that Jon felt the weight of it settle on his own heart like ashes. "A shadow of a prince," the figure replied softly. "A memory of a man who died with a dragon's name on his lips and prophecy in his ears, who lost his kingdom in the mud of a river for a dream he misunderstood." He lifted one hand. Flame trailed from the tips of his fingers like smoke as he placed that hand gently over his chest. "Once, before I died, they called me Rhaegar Targaryen. Cold. For all the heat in the clearing, Jon felt nothing but cold. The name hung in the air like a struck bell. He had heard it all his life in whispers and in curses. In the old songs, the minstrels sneaked into halls when they thought no one would mind. In the quiet, tight words his father never quite managed when Robert's cups went too deep and his rages too black. Rhaegar, Prince of Dragonstone, the man whose kidnapping of Lyanna had begun the war that had toppled a dynasty and nearly destroyed House Stark. Jon's hand left his sword hilt without his consent. "You're dead," he said. "You died at the Trident. The king killed you himself." "Yes." The fireman Rhaegar smiled faintly. "My breastplate was rubies. They burst like stars when Robert's hammer fell. So the tales go." He looked away just for a moment. Flame shivered around him. "I remember the impact, the weight of it, the feeling of my ribs collapsing. I remember the taste of my own blood. I remember thinking, even as the water rose around me, that I had misread everything, that all my songs were wrong." He looked back to Jon. The weight of that gaze was like standing alone on the wall in a storm. "But death is not always an end, Jon Snow. Not for those touched too deeply by fire. Changes us. It burns away the flesh, leaves only the purpose." "You expect me to believe this?" Jon heard the wild laugh in his own voice and clamped it down. "That Rhaegar Targaryen is standing in Winterfell's Godswood, in front of a Stark bastard. In front of my blood," Rhaegar said. The words hit Jon harder than any of Robb's practice blows. He actually staggered this time, catching himself against the trunk of a nearby elm. Snow slid from a branch and fell in a soft plump beside his boot. "You're what?" Rhaegar watched him with a gentleness that made something twist inside Jon. "Forgive me," the prince said quietly. "I have watched you all your life and forgotten this is the first time you see me. I speak too quickly." He inclined his head toward the heart tree, flame light shining on its pale bark. "You know the tale the realm believes, that I stole Lyanna Stark from her betrothed, ravished her, kept her prisoner in a tower while the world burned for my sin. You know how it ends, with your lord father finding her in a bed of blood, with my death, with a usurper's crown forged from rebellion." Jon swallowed. His heart hammered against his ribs, hard enough to hurt. He said hoarsely, "I know. It is not the whole story." Rhaegar's eyes darkened, embers banked. "Robert's hatred needed a villain. My father's madness provided the spark. Between them they burned truth to ash. Your lord father buried what remained to keep you alive." Silence fell between them, the snow-muffled quiet of the Godswood, the distant murmur of winter water, the slow drift of a solitary red leaf onto the pool's black surface. Jon heard his own breath loud in his ears. "Me," he said finally, and heard the word as if someone else had spoken it. "What am I?" Rhaegar's gaze softened. "My son," he said, "and Lyanna's, born in blood and sorrow, hidden in snow and silence, fire and ice together." The world tilted. Jon had thought himself braced for anything. He had wondered, as any bastard did, at tales of parentage. He had once, when he was younger and still believed in the justice of gods, entertained a foolish hope that his mother had been some great lady whom his father dared not name. But the hope had always withered under the reality of Catelyn Stark's coldness. If such were true, why the hatred? Why the perpetual wound? He had made his peace with not knowing. Or so he had told himself. Yet this was not the answer of any of those childish dreams. This was bigger and heavier and more terrible. "You're lying," Jon said. The words came out flat because they had to. "You're a wraith or a trick, or—" He groped for sense in a world gone strange. Why would Lord Stark lie to the king? Risk his life and ours to hide a Targaryen whelp in his own hall? Why would he raise me as his own, bastard or no? "Because he loved your mother," Rhaegar said simply. "And once, however briefly, he did not hate me." He stepped closer. The snow around his feet did not melt, though his body was living flame. Jon could feel heat, a soft, steady warmth, like standing with his hands near a brazier. "I did not take Lyanna against her will," Rhaegar went on. "We fled together. I believed in a prophecy then, in a song of ice and fire that would be born from our union. I thought myself the prince that was promised. I was wrong, but I was not wrong about you. You expect me to believe. Look at me." Rhaegar interrupted, gentle but firm. Jon, look. Jon's gaze was already fixed on him, but this time the prince did not mean teach. The outer shape, flames swelled, brightened. The world narrowed to the dark red of Rhaegar's eyes, to the way light moved in them. Something opened. Jon was no longer standing beneath the heart tree. He was falling through light, through heat. Images flashed past. A woman's laughter in a garden heavy with orange blossoms. The roar of a crowd in King's Landing's great hall. His own face in a mirror, younger, sharper, crowned with amethysts. A harp under deft fingers. A song that made men weep. Then a tower rose out of the light. A lonely thing of pale stone clinging to a mountainside. Blue sky aching overhead. The sound of a woman's labored breathing filled him, her cries tearing at his chest. He smelled blood and milk and the faint perfume of crushed blue roses. On a narrow bed lay a girl with dark hair spread around her like a storm. Her eyes were gray and fierce and fever-bright. Sweat glistened on her brow. Her hands clutched at sheets already soaked red. Beside her stood Lord Eddard Stark, younger, leaner, his face a raw, terrified mask. He knelt when she reached for him, taking her bloody hand in both of his. "Promise me, Ned," she whispered, voice ragged. "Promise me." Tears glistened in his eyes. "Lya, promise me." Her gaze flicked to the small bundle cradled in Rhaegar's arms. "They'll kill him, Robert the usurper. All of them. They'll kill our son for what we did, for who he is. You know they will. You know him. Promise me." Ned strained as if every word cost him. I promise," he forced out. "I'll protect him. On my honor, I swear it. He'll be safe." She smiled then, a small, broken thing, and her eyes slid toward Rhaegar. For a heartbeat, her fingers tightened around Ned's. "Tell him," she whispered, "when it's safe. Tell him who he is. Tell him we loved him." Her hand fell away. The tower vanished in a roar of red water. Rubies burst around Jon like stars as the river smashed into him. A warhammer came down. He saw his own chest cave in. He felt his life spill out into muddy water and saw, distantly, the sky above, bright and uncaring. Then he stood again in the godswood, chest heaving, fists clenched so hard his nails bit into his palms. The Fire Prince watched him with quiet pity. "I cannot show you all," Rhaegar said softly. "Only what the flames remember. But you see the truth of it, don't you? In your heart. The way you have always known you did not quite fit the skin the world gave you." Jon's legs folded underneath him. He dropped to his knees in the snow without grace, hand going to his mouth as if he might be sick. Gray eyes, fever-bright. "Promise me, Ned." "Why now?" he whispered when he could speak at all. "Why tell me now? I've lived near 16 years not knowing. Why come to me on the eve of the king's visit of all times?" "Because time grows short," Rhaegar said. He looked north, beyond the godswood, beyond the wall, beyond whatever lay even there. His gaze went far, far away, into distances Jon could not follow. "The long night stirs," the prince murmured. "The others turn in their cold graves. I have seen it in every shadow cast by every fire that yet burns in this world. My house is gone or scattered. My father's madness destroyed what we were. My own folly helped light the pyre." He looked back to Jon. "But the song is not finished. The world still needs its answer to the coming dark." The words scraped down Jon's spine like ice. "What do you want from me?" His voice cracked. "I'm a bastard of Winterfell. I'm nobody." Rhaegar's mouth quirked, almost fond. "You are Jon Snow. You are Eddard Stark's son in all the ways that matter, and my son in blood and fire. You are Lyanna's boy, with her wolf's heart and wildness. You are the joining of ice and flame. I want from you what the world will need. That you live, that you grow, that you rise." "Rise?" Jon repeated, numb. "Rise to what?" "Command," Rhaegar said. "Burden. Kingship, perhaps, if that is what fate demands. But I will not name it yet. Names are dangerous things. For now there is only this, I will guide you. Where there is fire, I will be with you if you will have me. I will give you what I did not have. Counsel unpoisoned by madness. A father's care not twisted by fear. He hesitated. Flame fluttered around him like doubt. And I will learn from you, Jon. For all my songs and prophecy, I died a failure. Perhaps, together, we can write a better ending. Jon stared up at him. He thought of Lord Eddard's quiet, steady love, of the way his father's hand had ruffled his hair in the yard when he was younger. He thought of Catelyn Stark's coldness, of the way the hall wrapped itself around 5 trueborn Stark children and left him always just outside the circle. He thought of the king's appraising glance and of Robert's stories of smashing dragon princes in the river. He thought of the vision in the tower, of Lyanna's eyes, of the way Ned's voice had broken when he swore. His world had been small a few hours ago. It felt cavernous now, full of long shadows and distant fires. If I say no? Jon asked quietly. Rhaegar nodded, unsurprised. Then I will watch from afar. I cannot force your path. The living must walk their own roads. I will whisper when I can. You may ignore me. You may go to the wall and lose yourself in black, never knowing what you might have been. You know about the wall, Jon said dully. I know enough. The prince's eyes softened. Do you truly think you have longed for the watch only because you are a bastard, Jon? Or has something older and deeper tugged at you whenever you gazed north? You are being called where you are needed. The wall needs you. The world beyond it needs you. There are things there you must see to be the man you will need to be. Jon bowed his head. Snowflakes melted against his cheeks where the heat from Rhaegar's presence touched him, leaving tiny cold tracks of water. A bastard, prince, a son of Winterfell and of Dragonfire. It was too much. Yet beneath the fear, beneath the anger and disbelief, something else stirred. All his life he had felt a kind of wrongness, a sense that he was slightly misaligned with the story everyone else seemed to be living. There had been moments, listening to old Nan's tales of the long night, staring into the flames of the barracks hearth, when he felt a string inside him hum, as if someone had plucked it with invisible fingers. Now he knew why. He lifted his head slowly. If I say yes, he asked, what happens? Then I will be there, Rhaegar said simply. When you take the black, when you raise your sword in the cold, when you are forced to choose between vows and blood, between duty and love. I will not always be able to tell you what to do, but I will show you what I did, so that you may judge where I faltered and walk a different path. His eyes, dark and full of slow fire, met Jon's. And when the dead walk and the world shivers on the edge of night, you will not stand alone. Jon let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. It steamed in the air between them, tangible as a promise. He thought of Robb, of Bran, of Sansa and Arya and little Rickon. He thought of Lord Eddard, of the weight the man carried in every quiet step. He thought of the king's children, golden and bright and brittle, like sun over snow that didn't reach the ground. He thought of Lyanna Stark, who had never been more to him than a tomb in the crypts and a story. Now she was his mother, and he could feel her fierce gaze in his own bones. I will go to the wall, Jon said, surprising himself with the steadiness of his tone. I always meant to. Bastard or prince, it doesn't matter. I gave my word to myself. I won't break it. Rhaegar inclined his head, as if that answer pleased him. Good. Honor matters. Your father gave you that. Jon swallowed. But if the wall is where I'm meant to be, if you're right about what's coming, about the long night, I can't be just another boy in black. Not if what you say of me is true. A strange clarity came over him then, a sense of standing on a threshold and knowing that if he stepped through, nothing would ever be the same. Teach me, Jon said. Rhaegar's smile was small and full of ancient sorrow, but for the first time it also held hope. I thought you would never ask. In the days that followed, Winterfell buzzed with royal presence. Servants scurried from dawn to dusk, hurrying to keep up with a king's appetite and a queen's standards. Sansa lived in a dream, her eyes wide with every glance stolen at golden princes and gleaming knights. Arya lived in a different dream, wild and resentful and exasperated with all the silks and courtesies. Robb's shoulders seemed broader with every feast, as if the weight of possible futures was settling there already. Jon moved among them as he always had, unremarked and uninvited. Yet the world had shifted its balance under his feet. He watched the king with new eyes now, seeing not just the jovial bluster but the shadows under it, the bitterness that flickered whenever an old tale brushed too near the rebellion's cost. He watched the queen, poised and polished and cold, her eyes calculating, her children arranged like jewels. He watched Joffrey, who moved through Winterfell with careless disdain, as if the very stones offended him. There was cruelty in that boy's mouth, in the way his eyes lingered on people, finding weakness, marking it. And when the candles burned low and the great hall emptied, Jon slipped away to the quiet places where fires still flickered low, kitchens, forgotten corridors, the guardrooms on the walls. There, in the restless dance of flame, Rhaegar came. Not always fully as he had in the Godswood. That had been a great exertion, he said, made possible by the ancient power of the weirwood and the intensity of the moment. More often he was half a presence, a suggestion of a figure in the corner of Jon's eye, a voice speaking out of the heart of the coals. "He is not the king the realm needs," Rhaegar said one night, when Jon had crept to the lesser hall's deserted hearth. The king in question slept somewhere above, snoring loud enough, if the servants were to be believed, to be heard through stone. Jon watched the embers shift. "Robert," he guessed. "Robert was never the king the realm needed," Rhaegar replied. "He was a hammer given a crown, useful in war, disastrous in peace." There was no bitterness in his tone, only weary acceptance. "I do not blame him entirely. We were all young. We were all blind to who we were. But a realm cannot be ruled by a man who only knows how to break." Jon poked at a coal with the iron rod, just to give his hands something to do. Sparks leapt, dancing up the chimney. "You sound as if you pity him." "I do," Rhaegar said. "He won the war and lost himself. The throne he coveted became a chair of knives he was not made for. He loved your aunt in his own way, or thought he did. When she chose otherwise, it broke something in him. Men like Robert are not meant to be broken. They shatter others when they try to put themselves back together." Jon considered that, thinking of the king's heavy hand on his father's shoulder, of the way Robert's laughter turned cruel when he was too deep in his cups. "And your father?" Jon asked quietly. "Do you pity him?" The flames shifted. For a moment the hearth filled with visions. A tall, gaunt man with wild eyes and lank silver hair. A hall filled with smoke and the smell of burning flesh. A laughing boy with mismatched eyes, too innocent to understand why he burned. "No," Rhaegar said, and there was steel in his voice like the ring of a tempered blade. "My father chose madness. He embraced it. He loved his fire more than his people. He loved fear more than respect. He looked into the same flames I did and saw only enemies. I will not spend my death excusing what he was." "Will I be like him?" Jon asked before he could stop himself. The question had been gnawing at him ever since the truth was laid in his lap. "If I'm your son, if I'm Targaryen." "Blood is not destiny," Rhaegar said sharply. Then his tone softened. "It has its pull, yes. Aerys and I shared a name and a lineage. Yet no one who knew us would confuse us. You have Ned Stark's steadiness, Lyanna's fire, my dreams. But you are not any of us, Jon. You are yourself. That is your strength." "I don't feel strong," Jon muttered. "I feel like I'm drowning." "Then learn to swim," Rhaegar said gently. "I drowned in a river once. I will not watch you do the same." So Rhaegar taught him. There were things a ghost made of fire could not teach. The weight of a crown, the feel of a sword biting live flesh, the tangled knots of ruling men and lords. There were things he knew too well. The perils of prophecy, the cost of obsession, the danger of confusing destiny with desire. He taught Jon history as it should have been taught, the truths behind the songs. Of Jaehaerys the conciliator and his long peace. Of Baelor the blessed, whose piety nearly starved the realm, of the Blackfire pretenders and the wars they had birthed. He told Jon of dragons, not just the beasts but the symbol they had become. They were never meant to be only weapons, he said, the firelight flickering like wings on the stone. They were balance, fire to melt ice, a counter to the long cold. When we lost them, something in the world tipped. The winters grew longer, the summers shorter. It is no accident, I think, that the others stir now. He spoke of prophecy, always with the caution of a man burned by his own faith. I spent my life chasing words in old books, he admitted. I thought if I could solve the riddle, I could save everyone. I saw signs in every comet, every dream, every whisper. I was so sure. I named my children like charms against darkness. Rhaenys, Aegon, the prince that was promised. I thought myself central to the story. I was wrong. Prophecy is not a map, Jon. It is a fire. Stand too close and you burn. Ignore it and you freeze. Then what's the point of it? Jon asked. If it doesn't tell you what to do. It warns us, Rhaegar said. It says, there will be a storm. Prepare as you will. Above all, he watched Jon. He watched the way Jon's temper flared and cooled, the way he chewed on choices until they were bare bone. He watched the way Jon watched others. Robb with a brother's pride and envy, Sansa with bafflement, Arya with fierce, secret affection. He watched Jon's eyes soften when he saw the younger boys of the castle training, stumbling through the same forms he'd once mastered. You care too much, Rhaegar said one night, appearing in the brazier beside Jon's narrow bed as the boy lay staring at the rafters. Good. The world will try to beat that out of you. Don't let it. Easy for you to say, Jon muttered. You're already dead. Precisely. I have the advantage of hindsight. Is that what this is? Jon rolled onto his side to look at the flickering prince. You trying to fix your mistakes through me? Yes, Rhaegar said without flinching. And no, I cannot undo what I did. Elia and our children are dead because I put dreams above them. Lyanna is dead because I let love and prophecy blind me to reality. The realm burned because I ran toward a song I barely understood. I will carry that until whatever end awaits even ghosts. But you are not my penance, Jon. You are my hope. Better hope, Jon said dryly. I don't make an even bigger mess of it than you did. Rhaegar actually laughed, soft and surprised. It was a warm sound. If you do, perhaps your son will be visited by his own inconvenient ancestor to complain about you. Such is the way of things. Jon smiled despite himself. The weight in his chest eased a fraction. He told no one. How could he? Whom could he tell? Lord Eddard, who had built his entire life around the lie that Jon was his bastard. Catelyn Stark, who would most likely have him sent to the wall in chains rather than risk even a rumor that a Targaryen prince slept down the hall from the king's only daughter. Robb, who would not know whether to clasp him or flinch. So he kept the secret in his chest like a hot coal, and only the ghost in the fire knew its full heat. He watched more closely. He listened. He stored away every word, every expression. Rhaegar did not need to tell him that the realm was a tinderbox. Jon could see it himself, in the way the king's and queen's eyes never seemed to meet without a flicker of contempt, in the way Jaime Lannister's golden gaze slid over the hall as if he were bored by everyone in it, in the way little Bran chattered about a queen with hair like spun gold, eyes shining with child's admiration. When he found Arya alone one afternoon, taking out her frustrations on a practice dummy with a stick, he paused to watch a moment. You're holding it wrong, he said finally. She whirled on him, hair flying, eyes blazing. You're wrong, she snapped. I'm stabbing it right in its stupid face. Too wide, Jon said, keeping his tone mild. You'll overbalance if it dodges. Feet closer, like this. He took the stick from her and showed her, thinking not just of what Donal Noy had taught him, but of the way Rhaegar had once held a tourney lance, the way the prince's shoulders had been loose and relaxed even under plate. Balance. Always balance. Arya grumbled but watched. She always watched when it came to swords. She fixed her stance, copied him, tried again. The awkwardness smoothed. Her feet found purchase. The stick thumped home more solidly. "That," Jon said. "See." She glared at him for a heartbeat longer, then grudgingly nodded. "You're still wrong about my holding it," she said, because she would not be Arya if she didn't have the last word, and turned back to the dummy. "She has lioness spirit," Rhaegar's voice murmured later that night from the low flame of ASI. "Engel candle in Jon's chamber. And some of yours. Watch her. The world will not be kind to a girl like that." "The world isn't kind to anyone," Jon muttered into his pillow. "True," Rhaegar said, "but we can be." The day finally came when Jon gathered his courage and went to his father. The king and his court were out hunting. The castle felt oddly hollow without them, echoes where laughter had been. Jon found Lord Eddard in his solar, surrounded by ledgers and small clothes in need of mending. The Lord of Winterfell attending to the unglamorous work of actually running his lands. Eddard Stark looked up when Jon entered, the faintest surprise touching his features before resolving into a gentle inquiry. "Jon," he said, "is something wrong? Has Robb gone and done something foolish again?" "No, father," Jon said, then faltered on the word. Eddard's eyes softened. He always did when Jon called him that, as if the title were a bomb and a wound both. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the stool across from his desk. "Tell me." Jon sat. For a moment he could not speak. The words he had rehearsed in his head all morning dried into dust on his tongue. "How did you say? I saw your sister die in a tower of my mind's fire. I saw you swear to protect me. I know now that I am not your bastard but your burden." "Father," Jon began again, slowly, carefully. "When the king goes south, when you go with him, I mean to take the black." Eddard's fingers stilled on the parchment he'd been holding. Pain flickered through his eyes so quickly most would have missed it. Jon did not. "You've spoken of it," Ned said. "Many times. I had hoped you might change your mind." "I haven't," Jon said. He forced himself to keep his gaze steady. "I know I'm not. I'll never inherit Winterfell. I'll never be a lord. But I can take the black. I can serve there. I can be something." "You are something," Ned said quietly. "You are my son." Jon flinched. "I'm your bastard." Ned's jaw clenched. For a heartbeat he looked almost angry, though Jon knew that anger was not truly for him. "You are my blood," he said. "Whatever name the world gives you." The words warmed and chilled Jon in equal measure. "The wall is where I belong," he insisted. "I feel it. I can't explain it. I just do." Rhaegar stirred in the candle's flame on the desk, unseen by Ned. "He is telling you the truth as he knows it," the prince murmured. "He has always walked toward that cold." Ned Stark closed his eyes briefly, as if in pain. When he opened them again, the Lord of Winterfell sat where the father had been. "If this is truly what you want," he said slowly, "I will not forbid it. You are near a man grown. The wall will be glad of a Stark sword." Jon swallowed. Will you tell me of my mother first?" The question came out more hesitant than he'd intended, but it was too late to catch it back. Ned's head jerked up. For a moment all color left his face. "Why do you ask?" His voice was no longer gentle. "Because a dead prince of fire told me she was your sister," Jon thought. "Because I saw you hold her hand as she died. Because I know my name is a lie." "I'll be leaving soon," Jon said instead, hating the way it sounded like a plea. "I might never come back. I just want to know who she was, what she was like. Please." Ned stared at him for a long, harrowing moment. Storms chased themselves behind his gray eyes, the same eyes Jon had seen in Lyanna in the vision. Old guilt, older love. "I made a promise," Ned whispered, not to Jon. Rhaegar's flame face was very still. "He did," the prince said softly. "The promise that kept you alive." Jon felt something inside him twist. "Am I not old enough to hear it?" he demanded, voice rising despite himself. "To know who I am? You tell me honor means keeping your word, that a man's vows are what make him a man. But am I to take the vows of the watch not even knowing my own? Enough! The word cracked like a whip. Jon fell silent. His father's face was pale, lined deeper than usual. He had never heard that edge in Ned Stark's voice before, not even when disciplining Robb for some foolishness. I have my reasons, Ned said, each word tight and controlled. One day you may understand. One day I may be able to tell you, but not now, not yet. Do you hear me, Jon? Rhaegar watched from the candle, his own expression stricken. I asked too much of him, he murmured. I did not think. Jon did not look at the fire. He looked at the man who had raised him and saw the wall there, higher than the wall in the north, built of duty and fear and love. Yes, my lord, Jon said, the old, safe form rising automatically to his lips. Ned flinched again at that, as if Jon had struck him. The lord's mask cracked. For a heartbeat the father was back. Jon, he said, and there was such anguish in it that Jon almost broke. When I return from King's Landing, we will speak again. I swear it. I will tell you then. Only not now. Not while the king is under my roof. Not yet. If I return, hung unsaid in the air. Words, Rhaegar whispered. Promises. We are tangled in them, you and I and he. Fate has a cruel sense of music. Jon forced his shoulders straight. I understand, he lied. Ned rose and came around the desk. For a moment Jon thought he might be embraced as Robb so often was. Instead, his father put a hand on his shoulder and squeezed, hard enough to hurt. You are a Stark, Ned said. Whatever anyone says, whatever you may hear, remember that. Jon nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He left the solar feeling hollow. Rhaegar's flame in the candle was thin and tremulous as he passed. The prince did not speak. In the corridor outside, the light from the narrow windows was already fading. Night was coming on, the air biting. Somewhere in the distance, he heard little Bran shouting with excitement. He would be climbing something he shouldn't. Jon did not know how much of the future was fixed. Rhaegar had been careful not to claim he saw all things, only shapes and possibilities. But as Jon made his way down toward the courtyard, an unease settled over him like a cloak. Can you change what's to come? He asked under his breath, more to himself than anyone, but he knew the ghost would hear. Some things, Rhaegar's voice answered faintly from a wall torch. Not all. Rivers can be diverted, not stopped. The trident still runs wherever we wade into it. Then what's the point? Jon demanded. The point, Rhaegar said, is that you are there when it matters most. Bran fell. The castle erupted like a struck hive. Shouts, weeping, the thudding of boots on stone. Servants ran white-faced through the halls, carrying water, linens, whatever Maester Luwin shouted for. Catelyn Stark did not weep. She sat at her son's bedside, hollow-eyed and silent, as if everything she had ever feared had come quietly and settled its weight on her shoulders. Jon was not allowed in the room. He hovered near the doorway anyway until a guard gently but firmly steered him away. Robb had gone in. Sansa had gone in and emerged pale and trembling. Bran had not woken. The world shifts, Rhaegar said from a nearby candle. Flame thinned with effort as if the fear and grief in the air made it harder to hold shape. This was always meant to happen in one form or another. The boy sees things he is not meant to see. Who pushed him? Jon asked, though he knew in some deep, instinctive part of himself that it was not a simple accident. The Lannisters' smiles were too clean. Jaime's had too much ease. The Queen's eyes had been too watchful. I do not know, Rhaegar said. The fire shows me much but not all. But I know this. The fall is a stone thrown into a pond. The ripples will reach far. Will he live? Jon's voice was rough. Rhaegar was silent. The candle's flame flickered uncertainty. That is not shown to me, he said at last. His path is entangled with others, with wolves, with ravens, with roots that go deep. Jon wanted to punch something, to strike out, to do anything but stand useless in the corridor while Bran lay somewhere between life and death. Instead, he went to Ghost. The dire wolf felt his turmoil when Jon pushed open the door to his small chamber. Ghost rose, tail low, and pressed his great head against Jon's chest, sniffing, whining softly. Jon buried his fingers in the thick white fur. "Bran fell," he said, voice breaking on the words. "He might die, and I can't do anything." Ghost licked his face, a rough rasp of tongue that smelled of meat and old bones. "You will not always be helpless," Rhaegar said, appearing fully now in the small, dim room's hearth, as if the intensity of Jon's need burned him brighter. "There will come a day when you will command more than your own two hands." "That doesn't help Bran now," Jon snarled. "No," Rhaegar agreed quietly. "It does not. Leadership is not magic, Jon. You cannot save everyone. If you try, you will break. All you can do is be ready when you are called to save some." "Then how do I get ready?" Jon demanded. "How do I become what you say I must be?" Rhaegar studied him. The firelight threw sharp shadows across Jon's face, making him look older. "Go to the wall," the prince said at last. "Go sooner rather than later. There is nothing more you can do here. Your father will ride south with his secrets and his honor. The king will return to his knives and his cups. The game will go on. But at the wall, there is work that matters now." "Leave," Jon echoed, startled by how much the word hurt. "Now? With Bran like this? With Lady Stark's grief bristling like spears," Rhaegar finished gently. "She will not weep on you, Jon. She will bleed herself dry on anyone who comes too near. Do not make yourself an easy target. You are no good to anyone dead or maimed." The bluntness of it stung, but Jon could not deny the truth. Catelyn Stark had always blamed him for Bran's love of climbing. He had been the one to laugh and encourage, to show the boy where the stones jutted, where the handholds were. If Bran died, she would likely never be able to look at him again without seeing the edge of a tower. "Tell your father," Rhaegar said, "tonight, before he leaves. Ask to ride with Uncle Benjen when he returns. The wall will take you. It always does." "What if he says no?" Jon asked, already thinking of Ned Stark's pinched face, of the way the man's hand had tightened on his shoulder. "Then go anyway," Rhaegar said. "You are no longer a child to be kept or caged. You are of an age to swear your own oaths." The idea of defying Ned Stark sat ill with Jon. But the thought of staying in Winterfell while the rest of his life waited in the cold gnawed at him worse. He stared into the flames, into Rhaegar's sorrowful eyes. "Will you be there?" he asked quietly. "At the wall? Or will you fade when I leave Winterfell?" Rhaegar's smile was wry. "I am bound to you, not to the stone. Wherever there is fire, I can find you. There are many fires at the wall, Jon Snow. They will need to be watched." Jon nodded, slowly, as if sealing something within himself. "All right," he said. "Then I'll go to the wall." He did not know yet what he would become there. Lord Commander, King in the North, something else entirely. Those were names for later. For now, he had only the road in front of him. A long ride north in black, into cold and unknown. Behind him, Winterfell's fires whispered. Within them, a dead prince watched and waited, a spirit of flame bound to a boy who was no longer just a boy. The world beyond the wall stirred, and somewhere out in the dark, in lands Jon had never seen, dragons turned their heads toward the north as if, in some deep old part of them, they could feel a new spark kindle against the coming night.